She saw the symbols first, glowing on stone walls that stretched higher than she could see. They weren't letters or numbers or anything from this world. But somehow, she could read them. Every single one. And they told her something she wasn't supposed to remember. The therapist's voice was soft, guiding her deeper. Lisa felt her breathing slow, felt her body sink into the cushions of the chair, felt the room around her fade into something else. Somewhere else. The air changed first. Cooler, drier. She could smell something like incense, but not quite. Something ancient and earthy. Stone dust maybe. Old paper. The kind of smell that comes from places that have existed for thousands of years without sunlight. Her feet touched cold stone. Smooth, polished, worn down by countless footsteps over countless years. She looked down and saw sandals on her feet. Not her feet. These feet were smaller, darker, the skin weathered in a way her 38-year-old office worker hands had never been. She was somewhere underground. She could feel it, the weight of earth and stone pressing down from above. But it didn't feel frightening. It felt safe, protected, hidden. Lisa had come to the regression therapist because of dreams. Not nightmares exactly, but intense, recurring visions that left her exhausted when she woke up. In the dreams, she was always searching for something, running through corridors, opening doors, looking desperately for something she'd lost, something important, something the world needed, but she never found it. Always woke up before she could reach whatever she was looking for, with her heart pounding and tears on her face and a crushing sense of failure. Her regular therapist suggested the dreams might be about her divorce, about losing her marriage, about feeling like she'd failed at something important. And maybe there was some truth to that, but the dreams had started before the divorce. They'd been with her for years, decades even, though they'd gotten worse recently. So she'd found Dr. Patricia Moreno, who specialized in past life regression, and decided to see if there was something deeper going on. Some memory from another lifetime bleeding through into her current consciousness. Now, standing in this underground space, Lisa felt that same desperate urgency from her dreams, the sense that something precious was at risk, something that needed to be protected at all costs. She looked around, and her breath caught. The space she was in was massive, a chamber carved from solid rock, with walls that curved up into darkness. And covering every inch of those walls, glowing with a soft golden light, were symbols, thousands of them, maybe millions. They seemed to pulse with their own energy, as if they were alive. She knew what this place was. The knowledge came without thinking, without questioning. This was the Hall of Records, and she was its keeper. Lisa felt her consciousness settle more fully into this other body, this other life. Her name was Amara. She was 26 years old, though age was measured differently in this time and place. This wasn't ancient Egypt, though it felt similar. This wasn't any civilization that existed in recorded human history. This was before, long before. The Hall of Records existed beneath a city that no longer had a name, in a land that had long since been swallowed by the ocean. Some would call it Atlantis, though that name came later, a pale echo of what this place actually was. But names didn't matter. What mattered was what was kept here, in this sacred space beneath the earth. Amara walked slowly through the chamber, her eyes scanning the walls. She wasn't reading casually. She was checking, making sure all the symbols were intact, that none had faded, that the knowledge they contained remained preserved and protected. Because these weren't just decorative carvings. These symbols were a record, a complete archive of human knowledge, human history, human potential. Everything that had been learned, discovered, created, understood over thousands of years was encoded here. Science, art, philosophy, technology, spiritual wisdom, everything. This was humanity's backup drive, created to ensure that if civilization fell, if catastrophe struck, the knowledge wouldn't be lost forever. And Amara was one of 12 keepers tasked with protecting this archive. It was a sacred duty, a responsibility that had been passed down through generations. She had trained for 15 years to qualify for this role, learning the language of the symbols, learning how to maintain them, learning the protocols that kept this place hidden and safe. The Hall of Records wasn't just a library. It was alive in a way. The symbols themselves held consciousness, held the energy and intention of the knowledge they represented. To read them wasn't just to understand information intellectually. It was to experience it directly, to download understanding into your awareness. Amara reached out and touched one of the symbols on the wall. Immediately, her mind filled with knowledge about astronomy, not facts and figures, but direct perception of how the stars moved, how the planets orbited, how the cosmic dance unfolded across time. She saw the mathematics that governed celestial mechanics, not as equations on paper but as living patterns, as relationships between forces and energies. She pulled her hand away and the knowledge faded, remaining accessible, but no longer overwhelming her awareness. That was the beauty of this system. The information was there when you needed it, available to be accessed, but it didn't clutter your mind constantly. You could live your life and then come here when you needed to know something, to learn something, to remember something that humanity had once understood but had forgotten. The hall had been created during a golden age, a time when consciousness was more expanded, when humans could perceive multiple dimensions of reality, when technology and spirituality weren't separate but worked together harmoniously. But even during that golden age, the wise ones knew it wouldn't last. They understood cycles. They knew that ages of enlightenment were always followed by ages of forgetting. Civilizations rose and fell. Knowledge was gained and lost and gained again. So they created the Hall of Records as insurance, as a gift to future generations who would need this knowledge to rebuild, to remember, to evolve beyond the cycles of destruction and rebirth that had plagued humanity for so long. Amara's daily routine was simple but profound. She would descend into the hall each morning through a hidden entrance known only to the keepers and a few high priests. She would spend hours walking the corridors, checking the symbols, performing maintenance on the energy systems that kept the hall protected and the knowledge preserved. The technology that powered the hall was beyond anything that existed in Lisa's modern world. Crystalline structures that converted thought into light, that transformed intention into physical reality. Energy grids that drew power from the earth itself, from ley lines and magnetic fields that ran through the planet like veins carrying life force. But it wasn't just technology. It was consciousness given form. The entire hall was an expression of collective human intention, built by masters who understood that matter was just dense energy, that physical reality could be shaped by focused awareness. Amara also spent time adding to the records. New discoveries, new insights, new technologies were constantly being developed in the city above. Part of her job was to encode this new knowledge into the symbol language, to add it to the walls so that it too would be preserved. She worked with a team. The other 11 keepers were more than colleagues. They were family, bound together by their shared purpose, their shared commitment to this sacred duty. They lived together in a dwelling near the hall's entrance, spending their lives dedicated to this single mission. There was Kale, the eldest keeper, who had been doing this work for 40 years. His hands were gnarled with age, but steady as he traced new symbols onto the walls. He knew more about the language of the records than anyone alive, could read patterns that others missed, could sense when knowledge was incomplete or needed clarification. There was Mira, who specialized in the spiritual records, the knowledge of consciousness and energy, and the nature of reality beyond the physical. She spent hours in deep meditation, accessing higher dimensions of awareness and then translating what she perceived into symbols that others could understand. There was Joran, who focused on technology, on the practical applications of knowledge. He was always experimenting, always testing whether the archived information was still accurate, whether it could still be implemented if needed. And there were others, each with their own specialty, their own area of focus. Together, they maintained the most complete archive of human knowledge that had ever existed. But maintaining the hall wasn't their only responsibility. They were also guardians in a more literal sense, because not everyone understood the importance of this work. Not everyone believed that catastrophe was coming, that the golden age would end. Many in the city above thought the keepers were paranoid, wasting their lives, preserving knowledge that would never be lost because humanity would never fall. There were even some who wanted to destroy the whole, who believed that hoarding knowledge was wrong, that everything should be shared freely with everyone regardless of their readiness or wisdom. They didn't understand that the hall wasn't about keeping secrets, it was about ensuring survival. Some knowledge, in the wrong hands or at the wrong time, could cause immense harm. The hall preserved everything but access was restricted to those who were prepared to use the knowledge responsibly. Amara and the other keepers had to be vigilant. There were defenses built into the hall itself, energy barriers that prevented unauthorized entry, but those barriers could be overcome by someone with sufficient knowledge and determination. So the keepers kept watch, maintained secrecy about the hall's exact location, used misdirection and disinformation to throw off those who sought it for wrong reasons. As Amara walked through the corridors on this particular day, she felt a growing unease. Something was wrong. The energy of the hall felt different, disturbed. The symbols on the walls seemed dimmer than usual, their golden glow flickering like candles in a breeze. She quickened her pace, moving deeper into the hall toward the central chamber where the most important records were kept. The Chamber of Origins, they called it, the place where the foundational knowledge was stored, the understanding of who humanity really was, where consciousness came from, what the purpose of physical existence actually was. If something was wrong in the hall, it would be most apparent there. As she approached the chamber, she saw light spilling from the entrance. Not the soft golden glow of the symbols, but harsh white light that hurt her eyes, and she heard voices, angry voices, arguing. Amara's heart began to pound. Someone had breached the hall. Someone was inside the Chamber of Origins. This wasn't supposed to be possible. She entered the chamber and saw chaos. 3 of the other keepers were there, Kale, Myra, and Joran, standing in a defensive position, and facing them were 5 people Amara didn't recognize. Strangers wearing the robes of the ruling council, the political body that governed the city above. They'd brought tools, metal instruments designed to chip away stone, and they were pointing at the walls, at the precious symbols, talking about removing them, about bringing them up to the surface, about making the knowledge public. Kale was trying to reason with them, his old voice steady despite the crisis. You don't understand what you're doing. The knowledge is protected for a reason. It needs to be accessed here, in the proper way, with the proper preparation. If you remove the symbols, you'll destroy them. They're not just carvings, they're living records. They can't survive outside this chamber. But the council members weren't listening. Their leader, a man named Darius, who Amara recognized as one of the more radical politicians, laughed dismissively. Living records, you keepers, and your mystical nonsense. These are just pictures on walls. Valuable pictures, yes, knowledge that belongs to all people, not hidden away in your secret cave. We're taking them. We're bringing them to the surface where they can benefit everyone, not just your little cult. Amara felt rage surge through her. Cult? This sacred work, this lifetime of dedication, reduced to a cult. But beneath the rage was fear, because Kale was right. The symbols couldn't survive being removed. They were part of the hall itself, connected to the energy systems, to the crystalline technology, to the consciousness field that kept the knowledge alive. Remove them and they would become just scratches on stone. Meaningless, dead. She stepped forward, adding her voice to Kale's. You'll destroy everything. Thousands of years of accumulated knowledge, lost in an instant because of your arrogance. Please, if you want the knowledge shared, we can work with you. We can teach people how to access it properly. But don't do this. Darius turned to her, and in his eyes she saw something that chilled her blood. Not just arrogance, but contempt. He didn't care about the knowledge. He cared about power. About being the one to break the keeper's control. To prove they weren't special. To redistribute what he saw as their monopoly. This wasn't about wisdom or sharing or helping humanity. This was politics. And politics had no place here, in this sacred space. The confrontation escalated. The council members moved toward the walls with their tools. The keepers tried to block them. There was shoving, shouting, the sound of metal scraping against stone, and then something terrible happened. One of the council members, frustrated by the resistance, swung his tool, not at the wall but at Mira. She tried to dodge but wasn't fast enough. The metal edge caught her across the temple. She fell, blood spreading across the stone floor. Everything stopped. The chamber went silent. Even Darius looked shocked, as if he hadn't meant for violence, hadn't thought things would go this far. But the damage was done. More than just to Mira, who lay unconscious and bleeding. The energy of the hall had been violated. The sacred space had been desecrated by violence, by bloodshed. Amara could feel it, a disturbance rippling through the very fabric of the hall, through the consciousness field that held everything together. The symbols on the walls began to flicker more intensely. Some started to fade, some began to change, their meanings distorting as the energy systems destabilized. Kale saw it too. His face went pale. Get out, he said to the council members, his voice low and urgent. Get out now. You've triggered a collapse. The hall is failing. Darius and his people didn't need to be told twice. They saw the symbols fading, felt the ground beginning to tremble, and they ran. fled back through the corridors toward the entrance, leaving their tools scattered on the floor, leaving Mira bleeding. The remaining keepers gathered around Mira, trying to wake her, trying to stop the bleeding, but Amara's attention was on the walls, on the symbols that were disappearing one by one, taking their knowledge with them into oblivion. She couldn't let this happen, couldn't let thousands of years of accumulated wisdom vanish because of political stupidity and violence. There had to be something she could do. She reached out with her awareness, connecting to the hall's energy systems in a way she'd been taught but had never actually done. It was dangerous, potentially fatal. To merge your consciousness completely with the hall's field meant you might not be able to separate again, might lose yourself in the vast sea of knowledge and energy. But she didn't hesitate. She opened herself completely, letting the hall's consciousness flow into her, and her consciousness flow into the hall. The boundary between Amara and the archive dissolved. She became the hall, became the knowledge, became the living record of everything humanity had ever understood. And from that merged state, she began to stabilize the energy systems, began to heal the disturbance, to calm the chaos. It was like trying to hold back an avalanche with your bare hands. But she was more than just Amara now. She was connected to the crystalline network, to the ley lines, to the collective intention of all the keepers who had ever served here. Slowly, painfully, the collapse stopped. The symbols stopped fading, the trembling ceased, the hall stabilized. But Amara knew that damage couldn't be fully repaired. Not here, not now. The violence had created a wound in the energy field that would take time to heal. And time was something they didn't have. Because up above, on the surface, the signs had been appearing for months. Earthquakes, tidal waves, the stars moving in unusual patterns. The wise ones knew what it meant. The age was ending. The golden age of this civilization was coming to a close. Soon, very soon, catastrophe would strike. The land would sink beneath the waves. The cities would be destroyed. The people would scatter, would forget, would lose almost everything they'd built. That's why the hall had been created in the first place. To survive the catastrophe, to preserve the knowledge through the dark age that would follow. But now, with its energy systems damaged, with its defenses weakened, would it survive? Amara, still merged with the hall's consciousness, saw the answer. No, at least not entirely. Parts of the hall would survive, protected by the deepest energy fields, by the most robust systems, but much would be lost. Maybe even most, unless she did something radical, something that had never been done before. She could encode the knowledge not just in the hall but in human consciousness itself, could take the most important information, the core wisdom that humanity would need to eventually remember and evolve, and implant it into the collective unconscious, into the soul memory that transcended individual lifetimes. It would be incomplete, fragmented. Future generations wouldn't have the clear, organized access that the hall provided, but they would have something, whispers of memory, intuitive knowledge, dreams and visions that carried pieces of the truth. And maybe, if she encoded it deeply enough, some souls would remember more clearly, would be born in future ages with stronger connections to this knowledge, with the ability to access it and share it and help humanity gradually rebuild what had been lost. Amara made her choice. She reached deeper into the hall's consciousness, into the vast ocean of knowledge stored here, and she began the process. It was like trying to compress an entire library into a single book, an entire ocean into a single cup. Impossible, but she had to try. She focused on the most essential teachings, the understanding that consciousness was primary, that physical reality was a manifestation of thought and intention, the knowledge that all beings were connected, that separation was an illusion, the wisdom that love was the fundamental force of the universe, that fear was just the forgetting of love. She encoded the principles of sacred geometry, the patterns that governed creation at every level. She preserved the understanding of energy healing, how consciousness could direct life force to repair physical damage. She stored the awareness of multiple dimensions, of realms beyond the physical that souls could access and explore. And she did something else, something personal. She encoded her own consciousness into the pattern. Not her individual personality, that would fade with death, but her essence, her commitment to preserving knowledge, her dedication to serving humanity's evolution, her willingness to sacrifice everything for this sacred work. She imprinted it all into the collective unconscious, sending it out like a signal that would echo through time. Future souls would carry these memories without knowing where they came from. would feel drawn to knowledge and wisdom without understanding why, would dedicate their lives to learning and teaching and preserving information because some deep part of them remembered this moment, this choice, this sacrifice. As she worked, Amara felt her individual identity beginning to dissolve. She was becoming part of something larger, something eternal. The boundaries between self and other, between past and future, between one lifetime and all lifetimes, were blurring. She saw her life as Amara from a distance now, saw her childhood in the city above, training to become a keeper, saw her joy the day she was accepted into the sacred order, saw years of quiet dedication, of patient service, of finding meaning in work that others didn't understand or appreciate. And she saw forward too, though time was becoming meaningless from this perspective. Saw the catastrophe coming, the waters rising, the land sinking, saw the survivors scattering to distant shores, carrying fragments of knowledge, seeds of remembrance that would eventually bloom into new civilizations. She saw Egypt rising thousands of years later, building pyramids that echoed the sacred geometry she was encoding now. Saw mystery schools forming, teaching initiates the same truths that had been preserved in the hall. Saw libraries being built in Alexandria, in Baghdad, in cities around the world, all unconscious attempts to recreate what had been lost. And she saw the modern age, saw technology advancing to the point where humanity might finally be ready to remember everything. Saw people like Lisa, 38-year-old office workers who had no conscious connection to this ancient past, but who carried the memory in their souls, who had dreams of searching for lost knowledge because some part of them remembered being here, remembered guarding the records, remembered the sacred duty. Amara understood now. This was why she'd done this work as Amara, not just for that one lifetime, but to plant seeds for future lifetimes. She would incarnate again and again, always drawn to knowledge, always feeling the need to preserve and protect and share what humanity had learned. The role might change, teacher, writer, librarian, scientist, but the essence would remain the same: guardian of the records, keeper of knowledge, bridge between the past and future. Her physical body, Amara's body, was dying. She could feel it from a distance, like watching something happening to someone else. The strain of merging so completely with the whole as consciousness was too much for human biology to sustain. Her heart was slowing, her breathing was becoming shallow, but she didn't feel afraid, didn't feel sad. This was the completion of her purpose. This was what she had incarnated to do, and she'd done it. The knowledge would survive, not perfectly, not completely, but enough for humanity to eventually remember, to rebuild, to evolve beyond the cycles of destruction that had plagued them for so long. The other keepers were there, she could sense them. Kale was holding her physical body, tears streaming down his old face. Mira had regained consciousness and was weeping too. They understood what Amara was doing, understood the sacrifice she was making, and they were grateful, honored, devastated, but also inspired. They would tell her story, would make sure future keepers knew about the one who had merged with the whole, who had saved what could be saved, who had given everything to preserve humanity's knowledge. Amara's last coherent thought as her individual consciousness dissolved was a message, a promise, sent forward through time to all the future versions of herself, all the souls who would carry her essence into new lifetimes. Remember, when you feel drawn to knowledge, when you feel the need to learn and preserve and share, when you have dreams of lost libraries and forgotten wisdom, that's me, that's us, that's the memory of this moment reaching across time. Trust it, follow it, keep doing the work, keep guarding the records, whatever form they take in your time, because this is who we are, this is who we've always been, this is who we'll always be. And then there was light, pure, brilliant, all-encompassing light, and Amara was no longer separate from anything. She was the light. She was the knowledge. She was the eternal consciousness that flowed through all beings across all time. She was home. Lisa gasped, her body jerking forward in the chair as if she'd been drowning and had just broken the surface. Her face was wet with tears, her hands were shaking. Her heart was pounding so hard, she thought it might burst from her chest. Dr. Moreno was there, steady and calm, her hand on Lisa's shoulder. "You're back. You're safe. Take your time, breathe." Lisa tried to speak, but couldn't. The experience was too big, too profound, too overwhelming to put into words. She'd been Amara, she'd lived that life, felt that dedication, made that sacrifice, and some part of her had never stopped being Amara, had carried that mission forward through lifetime after lifetime. The dreams made sense now. She wasn't searching for something she'd lost. She was searching for the Hall of Records, for the knowledge that had been scattered and hidden and preserved in the collective unconscious. Her soul remembered. Her soul knew it was still out there, still accessible, still waiting to be found. Dr. Moreno let her sit in silence for several minutes, giving her space to process. Finally, Lisa found her voice. It was real, wasn't it? Not just in my imagination. That place existed. That civilization existed, and I was there. Dr. Moreno nodded slowly. I can't prove it scientifically, can't show you historical records or archaeological evidence, but yes, I believe it was real. I've had other clients access similar memories, different roles, different perspectives, but the same place. The same Golden Age civilization that existed before recorded history. The same catastrophe that ended it. The same effort to preserve knowledge for future generations. Lisa felt validation wash over her. She wasn't crazy. This wasn't just fantasy or wish fulfillment. This was genuine memory, accessed through the mysterious mechanism of consciousness that transcended individual lifetimes. What do I do with this? Lisa asked. How do I live my normal life knowing what I know now? Knowing who I was, what I did, what I sacrificed. Dr. Moreno smiled gently. You honor it. You honor Amara by continuing the work in whatever form it takes in your current life. You're already doing it, you just didn't realize it. Why did you become a librarian before your career change? Why are you so passionate about information preservation and access? Why does it upset you so much when knowledge is suppressed or destroyed? Lisa blinked. She'd been a librarian for 12 years before burning out and switching to office work. She'd loved it at first, loved helping people find information, loved the smell of books, loved being surrounded by knowledge, but budget cuts and politics had gradually destroyed her passion. Watching books being thrown away because there wasn't shelf space, watching digital archives being shut down because of lack of funding, watching knowledge becoming commodified, accessible only to those who could pay. It had broken her heart, had felt like a personal betrayal, though she'd never understood why. Now she did, because she'd spent a lifetime protecting knowledge, had died to preserve it, and watching it being treated carelessly in this modern age triggered that ancient trauma, that soul deep commitment. I need to go back, Lisa said suddenly. Not back to the hall, I mean back to that kind of work. I need to do something that matters, something that honors what Amara did. Dr. Moreno nodded. That's the gift of past life regression. Not just understanding where you've been, but seeing clearly where you need to go. What form might that work take for you now? Lisa thought about it. The modern world didn't have halls of records in underground chambers, but it had other ways of preserving and sharing knowledge. Digital archives, online libraries, open source movements dedicated to making information freely available, educational initiatives, literacy programs, and there were people fighting to protect knowledge from being lost, from being controlled by corporations or governments, from being destroyed by censorship and political agendas. People creating decentralized systems for preserving information. People working to ensure that humanity's accumulated wisdom remained accessible to future generations. She could join that fight, could dedicate her energy and passion to that cause. It wouldn't be exactly the same as being a keeper in the Hall of Records, but it would be the modern equivalent. It would be honoring the mission that Amara had died for. The weeks after the regression were transformative. Lisa quit her office job, took a temporary pay cut, and found work with a nonprofit organization dedicated to digital preservation. They were creating redundant archives of important knowledge, storing it in multiple locations and formats, to ensure it could not be lost to server failures or political suppression. It felt right in a way nothing had felt right for years. She was using her librarian skills again, but with a deeper sense of purpose. This wasn't just a job, this was a calling. This was her soul's work. She also started having different dreams. Not the frustrating searching dreams, but peaceful dreams, where she was back in the Hall of Records, walking the corridors, reading the symbols. In these dreams, she could access the knowledge directly, could download information about healing, about energy, about consciousness. She started keeping a dream journal, writing down everything she could remember when she woke up. Some of it seemed like nonsense, but some of it felt profound. Insights about how consciousness worked, ideas about healing modalities, concepts about technology that didn't exist yet but could be developed. She shared some of this with Dr. Moreno, who encouraged her to trust it. The knowledge Amara encoded into the collective unconscious is still there. the therapist explained. You have a stronger connection to it than most people because you were the one who put it there. Your dreams might be your soul's way of accessing that information, of bringing it forward into conscious awareness. Lisa also connected with others who had similar memories. Through online forums and spiritual communities, she found a handful of people who recalled being keepers of knowledge in that ancient civilization. Their memories had different details but the same essence, the same dedication, the same sense of having sacrificed everything to preserve what mattered most. Together, they formed a support group, meeting monthly to share their experiences and explore how they could honor their past life missions in the modern world. Some were writers, creating books that encoded ancient wisdom in contemporary language. Some were teachers, educating children and adults about consciousness and spirituality. Some were technologists, building systems to preserve and share knowledge freely. They called themselves the Modern Keepers, a somewhat tongue-in-cheek name that nonetheless captured their shared sense of purpose. They weren't delusional, thinking they could recreate the Hall of Records or restore the Golden Age civilization, but they could do their part to ensure that knowledge was preserved, that wisdom was shared, that humanity's hard-won understanding wasn't lost to another dark age. Lisa found love within this group, a man named David who also remembered being a keeper, who also carried the same soul-deep commitment to knowledge preservation. Their relationship was easy, natural, built on shared values and shared purpose. They understood each other in ways that went beyond this lifetime. Her life transformed from something she was just going through the motions of, to something meaningful, something aligned with her deepest truth. The emptiness that had haunted her for years, the sense that something was missing, finally filled. She'd found what she'd been searching for in those dreams. Not a physical place, but a sense of purpose, a connection to her true self. She thought often about Amara, about that moment of sacrifice, about the choice to dissolve individual consciousness into something larger. And she understood now that Amara hadn't really died. Consciousness couldn't die. The individual personality had dissolved, yes, but the essence had continued, had reincarnated, had found new forms, new lifetimes, new ways to serve. Lisa was one of those new forms, and there would be others after her. The work would continue as long as humanity needed knowledge preserved, needed wisdom shared, needed bridges between the past and future. She also understood her divorce differently now. Her ex-husband had been a good man, but he didn't understand her dedication to knowledge, her passion for preservation. He'd wanted her to focus on making money, on building a comfortable life, on practical concerns. And there was nothing wrong with that, but it wasn't her path. She needed to honor the commitment her soul had made thousands of years ago, needed to keep guarding the records, whatever form they took. And that required a partner who understood, who shared that mission. David understood. David shared it. That's why their relationship worked in ways her marriage never had. One day, about a year after her regression, Lisa was organizing a digital archive when she came across something that made her stop breathing. It was a symbol, part of an ancient artifact that had been photographed and uploaded to the database. A symbol that looked exactly like the ones she'd seen in the Hall of Records in her regression. She stared at it for a long time, her heart pounding. The artifact had been found in underwater ruins off the coast of Japan, part of a structure that mainstream archaeology couldn't explain. Most scientists dismissed it as natural formation or exaggerated claims, but Lisa knew better. She recognized that symbol, knew what it meant. It was a marker, a sign left by the keepers to guide future generations, a breadcrumb trail pointing toward where knowledge had been hidden. She contacted Dr. Moreno, shared what she'd found. The therapist was intrigued but cautious. "What are you going to do with this?" Lisa thought about it. "I'm going to follow it. Not obsessively, not in a way that disrupts my life, but I'm going to research these ruins, see what else has been found, see if there are other markers, because maybe the Hall of Records wasn't completely destroyed, maybe parts of it survived, buried deep, waiting to be rediscovered." Dr. Moreno nodded. "And if you find it, if you actually locate physical evidence of the hall, then I'll do what Amara would have done," Lisa said. "I'll protect it, make sure it's accessed properly, preserved carefully, shared wisely. I'll guard the records, because that's what I am. That's what I've always been. That's what I'll always be." The Hall of Records still exists. Not in one place, but scattered across the earth, hidden in underwater ruins and underground chambers and encoded in the collective unconscious. The keepers still exist too, souls who incarnate lifetime after lifetime with the mission to preserve, protect, and eventually restore humanity's lost knowledge. Maybe you're one of them. Maybe that's why this story resonated with you, why something deep inside you recognized the truth of it. If so, don't ignore that recognition. Honor it. Find your way to continue the work, because the records are waiting, and the world needs keepers now more than ever. Subscribe for more memories that might be your own.